professor here at UNF. What do you think about men being educated on domestic violence? How should that go about, or how should men be educated? Is that a good thing?
Yeah, I think that men should be educated about domestic violence. I think young women should be educated also about domestic violence. It's interesting because this is one of the issues of which I teach about that is so far from my own personal experience, and I teach about it when I teach sociology of the family. And almost every unit that I teach in that class, I have something really personal to say, whether it's about divorce or whether it's about how being raised in a step family feels. And then when I get to the unit on violence and abuse, it's something that I myself have so little experience about and exposure to. So even in my own classroom, it's a really hard lesson for me to teach, because for me, the personal experiences that I've had often really translate into my ability to teach. So because I haven't experienced it very much, it's also one of those issues that I, as an educator, feel disconnected from or disconnected to when I see my students. It's hard for me to pick up on the degree to which it's something that they've experienced, whether it's in the families that they grew up with, if it's something that their moms or their dads experienced while growing up, or if it's something that they're currently going through in their own intimate relationships. It's just something that I'm not personally keyed into. And I think that creates in my teaching and my perception of what the campus is like is sort of like a certain level of denial. And there's a lot of issues that I personally know how to engage with my students on, and this just isn't one of them. And so I think when I see issues like last week's march for Take Back the Night going on, and I stand up really vocally and I encourage my students to turn out, I think that's a really powerful event. That was an event that had buy-in from a lot of different organizations on campus, and I think that's one of the things that makes educating young men and young women about domestic violence or intimate violence, sexual violence really important. Is it's not just the Women's Center, it's not just a sorority, it's not just criminal justice, or it's not just sociology coming at it. It's all of those organizations together. One of the organizations that wasn't present as a supporter in the Take Back the Night marches, you didn't see fraternity support in that, but I know some of the fraternities on campus are partners with some of the issues that go on around this particular topic. So I think when we talk about these issues, it's really nice to have buy-in or support from a wide variety of different constituencies. And it's like Jackson Katz, who you directed me towards, said, is that, you know, the peer influence and modeling from people that you see as like yourself is really important. It can't be someone else, someone who seems really different from you, somebody with different concerns who's pushing this message on you. I think it's best when it's shared with a wide variety of people who you can identify with. So that's just how I'm going to start off, and I'll go with a follow-up question.
That was really good.
I get paid to talk every day.
Educating men, you talked about how men are being educated, but then there's no well, there's not really no support, but it's one of the main steps that we're trying to get across to men and be proactive. It's not just the men though, it's the women too. A lot of people look at it as a women's issue, saying, well, she should have known, she should have done this. But the men also need to know on their own level, I guess, how you can say. So what I don't know where I'm trying to go with this, but if it sparks anything you need to say.
I think some of my friends and colleagues have done research on sexual violence, especially in collegiate cultures in college campuses. And one of the things that makes our campus different is that we don't have traditional fraternity houses, and we don't have a lot of the other infrastructure that a school like UF or FSU would have that houses party dynamics. And what some of my colleagues have really looked at is how just the very fact that most parties take place on male turf creates, I don't know, a culture or opportunities for sexual violence to occur. So there's sort of a gender imbalance from the get-go as to who's hosting parties, who has control over the alcohol at the parties. My friends have analyzed how at a typical fraternity party there might be a keg or a beer in the main area, but the better quote-unquote alcohol would be behind closed doors, and so then you can get the lure, maybe like the more attractive or desirable girls behind closed doors and have mixed drinks. And once that sort of dynamic starts taking place, it creates a lot of privacy and private spaces for sexual violence and sexual assault to occur. So I think that's one of the things that sociologists look at, is not necessarily the culture in which men are raised or a culture of violence in which we all exist, but sort of how the structure, especially the social structure and the party structure that exists on most college campuses, is an imbalanced structure. So it doesn't really blame the men or blame the women as victims, but it looks at sort of the kind of context in which partying takes place and how that creates possible scenarios for these behaviors to play themselves out in. There are loud spaces, there's private spaces within these parties, so where the alcohol and who controls that, how the music influences the dynamic, and also young people are very curious, sexual exploring, and their identities are hinged to some extent on this idea of hooking up with the right person. And when you bring all of those things together, something that's very ordinary and fun can move into a territory that's abusive and violent.